what I'm going to talk about today is heroes. Now, me and Ellie had a quick conversation before about all the hero movies that are out. Right now, I think there's about 3 or 4, and in fact, maybe 5 coming out soon. There's like X-Men First Class, Green Lantern, Captain America. Huh? I can't wait for Transformers which is kind of a hero movie. And in today's society, guys, we're always surrounded with hero symbols. I don't know, when growing up, for instance, we have Michael, our own superhero. Maybe you can call him a villain, our superhero. Today, for you guys who had a childhood, me and Joel were talking about Dragon Ball Z. I know, I think that's the best kind of hero in the world. People that run around screaming and turn golden. I don't know, that's kind of the best kind of hero. Now, so let's look at it a bit biblically. Now, I want to talk to you guys about heroes of the Bible, and what heroes really are. So tell me, what is a hero to you guys? If I ask you today, tell me who is a hero, just tell me, what would your criteria be? What would be your list to pick a hero in your life? Handsome. Even if it's fictional. Handsome? Look cool? Yeah, Isaac? Only Gen OP. For you guys that don't know what that means, it means you kill everybody and overpowered. Joel? You had your hand up? You look up to them? Literally and physically. They have to be tall, strong, good looking. Racer? Powers? What about Batman? Come on. Batman. Can drive on the sand with the Evo? Well, I don't know about you guys, but when we talk about heroes, the first thing that comes to my mind is justice. Sorry? Justice. That's the first thing that... Exactly. Now, when I think about a hero, I think about someone justice and righteous, someone who's upright, someone who, in a term, holy, someone who is good, someone who, that people can look up to and is a good role model. You guys all following me? Everyone's with me? Right? So, I believe that in itself is enough of a description. I don't really need to tell you guys the answer. Who am I going to point to in the Bible? Who am I going to point to that is... Abraham. No? Isaac. No? Jacob. Huh? Esau. Thank you, Joel. Jesus. Thank you. Thank you. Now, I don't... All right, guys. Now, we all have in the Bible a hero whose righteousness is not matched by anyone. You got someone here whose justice, righteousness, compassion, uprightness cannot be compared to anyone. Now, what makes him so righteous? What makes him so holy? What makes him so good and upright? Well, let's read in the Bible. Let's go Romans 3. Yeah, I did trick you. Romans 3:26. I'm reading. Thank you. Just one verse, Romans 3:26. And before you read, I just want to mention to you guys, I'm not going to be dwelling a lot of time on Jesus specifically and what he's done for us. I think that's pretty clear to pretty much all of you guys right now. But before we continue on, you have to understand that without this, everything else is meaningless. Without this core concept, there's no point for you guys to listen to the rest of what I have to say. So let's read what it says, from just verse 26.
To demonstrate at the present time his righteousness, that he might be just and the justifier of one who has faith in Jesus.
Now, let me tell you what makes Jesus different as a hero to all the heroes which we have. Let me tell you guys. You know what's different? Is that not only was he just, not only was he righteous, but he made those people who believe on him just. Do you hear what I'm saying? When Superman saves someone, he doesn't change that person. He doesn't change that person in any way. He comes just and he leaves just, and that person who was maybe getting robbed or something is the same, except he has more money in his pocket. He wasn't being robbed. But when Jesus saves us, when Jesus becomes your Savior, when you put your faith and your trust and your whole life with Jesus, he says his justice, his righteousness becomes your righteousness. So I am righteous now, not because anything I've done. And I know all of you guys are witness to that. I am not righteous for my own works, but I'm righteous because of what Jesus has done. Jesus has given me his righteousness. So today, as a Christian, when I proclaim to you guys, I believe in what Jesus Christ has done for me. I have put my faith on him and on him alone, and he has reconciled me with God. Now I am righteous, not because of what I've done, but because God, Jesus himself, has given me his righteousness, and I wear that righteousness as a white garment, as pure and holy. Are you guys following me? Right? Now, there's a difference with being declared righteous and living a righteous life. Now, let's turn to Hebrews 11. That's the foundation. You guys have to understand, first of all, that there is no hero except like Jesus. There's no hero like Jesus because he saved us and also he has justified us and made us righteous. So Hebrews 11. See, I didn't trick you. I was got. Huh? I know. Now, before we read from a verse, I know you're so eager to read from the Bible, but before we... Oh, the iPad, sorry. Before we go on, you guys have to understand that Jesus is called our captain. I think that's a very important, concept, very important theology, whatever the word is, for us as Christians. You have to understand, a captain is someone who we strive to follow and we strive to be like. So when the Bible says Jesus is your captain, it means in every way you have to strive to be like him. So when Jesus has given me his righteousness, when he's made me just, when now in every way I'm good and upright, not because of my lifestyle, but rather because of what he's done, it calls me to a life to live of righteousness. So when I have been given Jesus' righteousness, now as a Christian I have to live according to what I have been given. And now this is what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about today about living a life according to your faith, which is the righteousness of God. So if someone can read, not Hebrews 11, Hebrews 10, verse 38 and verse 39. Thank you, Michael.
Okay, now, the just shall live by faith. But if anyone draws back, my soul has no pleasure in him. But we are not of those who draw back to perdition, but of those who believe in the saving of the soul.
Now, this is once again just engraving this idea that the just live by faith. That now I am justified, I live my life in the faith which I have put in Jesus Christ. And he makes it clear here that we are not of those who fall back into the world, but rather we're living a life that is evident of the saving of my soul. My soul has been saved because of what Jesus has done for us. Now, everything should be to glorify him. In every aspect of my life, I should be wanting to follow him. This is just a natural procedure of things. It's just a natural order. If you've been saved by Jesus Christ, naturally you want to live a life of righteousness which follows what he has given us. In our chapter 11, thank you. I don't want to read into it because we could actually spend hours upon hours talking about each individual person mentioned and talking about their life and their problems and how they overcame this, but I'm just going to speak generally about this. In chapter 11, you got here which people call the faith chapter. And I'm going to call it the heroes of faith chapter. Because right here, the Bible mentions a few of the many heroes of faith we find in the Word of God. And this is exactly what God is calling us to do. As Christians today who have put their faith in Jesus Christ, we are called to live a life of faith which brings forth righteousness. You guys all following me? Now, so I'm just going to skim quickly. And by the way, guys, I don't have a lot to share with you guys today because I don't believe this message can be really drawn out much. It's pretty short, it's pretty direct. So let's just go. I'm just going to quickly just summarize some of the heroes we have here. I'm not going to read out the verses, but just follow me. In verse 4, we have Abel. If you don't know the story about Abel, this is a man that brought his best to God. He brought his best to God, and for doing that, he was killed. Pretty much. He is the first person to be murdered in the whole world, and he brought his best to God, and for giving his best to God, he was killed. That's his faith, that he put his best to God, and because of that faith, he was killed. We have Enoch, who by his faith in God did not see death on this earth, but was captured into heaven. Then we have Noah, who by his faith, for 120 years spent his time building an ark, and while the whole world was mocking him, and because he persisted in his faith, he was saved. Thank you. Abraham, by his faith, when he was 100 years old, was able to give birth to a son. Well, him and his wife were able to conceive a son by faith alone. And because of that, Abraham has probably the longest section, because we know that his faith is one that the Bible looks as iconic. That by his faith, all the promises were given to him that are given to us. By his faith, God saw him as righteous. He said it was given to him righteousness for his faith. So we keep on reading. There's hundreds of examples. If we run down to Moses, we all know the story of Moses. By his faith in God, he was able to save a whole nation of like 2 million Jews. They approximate 2 million people. A whole nation by his faith was saved by God using him. We have in verse 30, Joshua, who was the leader of the Israel armies at a stage, was able to conquer the unconquerable city, which was so high by his faith in God, not by any of his works, by merely listening to God's orders, he was able to conquer it. You have Rahab the prostitute. Rahab the prostitute who put her faith in God, and by that faith was able to help the Israelites conquer and move on. You have, and in verse 32, just read me verse 32. And this is what the writer is saying. And what shall I more say? For the time will fail me to tell you of Gideon, of Barak, and of Samson, of Jephthah, of David, and also of Samuel, and also of the prophets. So the writer here is saying that I could go on talking to you guys about the heroes of faith. I could go on and on and on, but I don't have the time to tell you. And this is what I'm telling you guys today. Right now, we have this great cloud of witnesses for us of what a hero of faith is. And we have all these examples. And I love the story of Gideon. You have the lowest man of the lowest family, of the lowest tribe in all of the nation of Israel. And God used him, by his faith, was able to save Israel from slavery. And there's so many stories. You got Samson. We all know the story of Samson, who by his faith was able to destroy the temple of the idols. Now, what does this mean to us? In fact, before we go on to that, I just want to mention something. In today's culture, we're told that heroes, really, they get the best of everything. Today, we're told that, you watch a movie. I watched Green Lantern recently. It's kind of like one of those movies that say, oh, I can't believe I'm a hero. Do I get the girl now? Ha, ha, ha. And he ends up getting the girl. And always at the end of hero movies, or the end of majority of what we have today, heroes get everything at the end. Majority of the time. Not Spider-Man, unfortunately. But majority of the time, heroes get everything at the end. It's kind of your, stereotypical ending of a hero story. The hero finally, by overcoming his weaknesses, was able to conquer the enemy, and everyone is happy. Somehow no one else died except the bad guy, and he gets a girl, and they live happily ever after. That's what we're told about heroes. But the Bible makes a completely different story about heroes. Completely different. And so what I want to stress to you guys today, the Bible calls us to be a hero of faith. That's what God calls us to do. We're called to live a life of righteousness, that we will be numbered with these people one day, that people will say that was a hero of faith. And that time we're not told to tell about Freedom Youth, who in Bankstown stood up for God and became a great hero for God. But let's see what happens to these heroes, these people who stood up for God. If someone can read from verse 33 to verse 35, before you start reading, this is a quick summary of all these things these heroes did, just so you know the background. From verse 33 to verse 35.
Who through faith subdued kingdoms, worked righteousness, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the violence of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, out of weakness were made strong. They became valiant in battle, turned to flight the armies of the aliens. Women received their dead raised to life again. Others were tortured, not accepting deliverance. that they might obtain a better resurrection. Still others had trial of mockings and scourgings, and yes, of chains and imprisonment. They were stoned, they were sawn in two, were tempted, were slain with the sword. They wandered about in sheepskins and goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, tormented, of whom the world was not worthy.
Thank you. That's perfect. Now, we begin off with these wonderful conquests of these heroes who through faith subdued kingdoms. That's a pretty big call. I don't know, I can never say in my life by faith have I conquered nations. I can never say by my faith I even have conquered the things in my life which are obstacles to me in my life with God. I can't even say that, yet these heroes of faith conquered kingdoms. And I don't want to go through them, but up to verse 35, you have all these things these heroes have done. All these things were just incredible. Like, it's mind-blowing. It goes, stop the mouths of lion. Let's just stop here, all you macho men. Honestly, all you guys. Who can say, right now, if a lion came up to you, you'll be able to grab it by the mouth and stop it from eating your face off? I don't know. Just down the road, only Joel, of course. But just down the road, there's a church near the central centre of Bankstown, and it has a sign. I actually saw it yesterday, and it's pretty, I laughed. It has a picture of a lion roaring, and it's really simple. It goes, scared, ? And goes, fear the maker. You guys get it? Now, these are people who not only were able to overcome the things of this earth, but had a great fear of God. Now, verse 36, it starts the negative parts. It starts with these people start going through trials. And guaranteed, all these people who are mentioned, I can show you in the Bible, where for their faith in God, for standing up for God, they went through these trials. Every single one of them. There's not one person who did not stand up for God and said, I want to be a hero of God. I want to be a hero of faith by the righteousness which He has given me, who did not have to go through trials. And just some of them, like, read it. I don't know if you guys actually were following and actually reading the words which He said. Just from verse 36, the others had trial of cruel mockings and scourgings. And verse 37, they were stoned. Have you ever pictured what it might be to be stoned? I don't know, I can't remember, someone was talking about it, and they said stoning, the fact of stoning, what was so horrendous about it, sorry, I don't want to gross anyone out, was the fact that you wouldn't die immediately. It wasn't that you died immediately. Most of the time, you would suffer the whole time the stoning was going through. Unless one rock got you like in your head and you got knocked out. Majority of the time, you would have to suffer for your stoning. And right next to it, they were sewn asunder. They were ripped apart. And I don't know if this is correct, but I think it's referring to Samuel, maybe, or someone in the Old Testament who was connected to two horses, and for his standing up for God, for saying that we must follow the God, the Jehovah, we have to follow Him and not follow the idols of this world. What they did, the king got him, put him between two horses, and got the horses to go separate directions. I'm sorry, I don't want to gross you guys out. I'm really not, but just so you can understand what this is saying about these heroes of faith. Yes? We're getting to that, don't worry. Now, and I think verse 38, truly, this speaks my thoughts, of whom the world was not worthy of. This is what God is saying of these heroes. In this world, the heroes of God will be put down. The heroes of God will be mocked, will go through trials, and in this world's eyes will seem like foolish people. But in the eyes of God, they were worthy. And this world is not worthy of them. Now I want to stop for a moment. Now, you guys got to understand what this writer of Hebrews is trying to say here. He's mentioning all these people who are great men and women of God, great men and women of faith, giants of faith. And he's saying all these people who lived in faith for God, they received nothing but the promises of what we have today. You guys understand what I'm saying? In verse 39, someone read verse 39 and verse 40 for me. Thanks, Mark.
And all these things, having obtained a good testimony through faith, did not receive the promise, God having provided something better for us, that they should not be made perfect apart from us.
Now, what he's saying here to us, he's saying all these people lived before Jesus lived. All these people only heard about the promises of Jesus. They only God told them in the future a Messiah will come and will save the people, and people who put their faith in him will be saved. They only heard of the promises, yet only after hearing they lived a life like this. Yet how much more should we be living a life for God if not only have we heard, but we have received? So you got these men and women who completely gave their lives to God only upon hearing the word of God. Now, not only have we heard, but we have received. How much more are we called to live for God? I don't know, when I read these verses, I feel ashamed. I honestly feel ashamed. Because all these people lived their life for what I have today. All of them look forward to what I have received, and yet my life is honestly a shame compared to theirs. And please, do not get me wrong, I'm preaching first to myself. I'm only sharing to you guys what I got convicted of, just to share with you guys. And to go what Brother George mentioned before, I want to share with you guys a story. Recently, I've been reading a big, fat book about the history of the church. And I don't know if you guys know much about the history of the church. Yes, in fact, Michael gave me this book as he was throwing out his books. Well, his dad's books, in fact. All I can say, that book was really good. It's lucky I got it before you threw it out. That's all I'm going to say. Now, the first couple of chapters deal with the Christians between about 100 AD to 300 AD. Sorry, we're going to have a bit of a history lesson. You're going to have to listen. Now, at this time, the Roman Empire ruled pretty much the whole world. They were the world empire at that time. And in this time, Christianity was so persecuted that honestly, I don't even picture what happened to those Christians. And I'm not even going to tell you in details what happened to them because it's not the most encouraging thing to hear. I don't want to really go into details, but I want to share with you guys one story of a hero of that time. About 200 AD, so 1,800 years ago, 200 AD in France, one of the persecutions of the Christians was hitting the peak. It was one of the peak. Over the Roman Empire, there was different peaks at different times. And in France, this happened to be the peak at that time. And this whole church was chucked into prison. Now, in this church, there was this one young female, and she was, in fact, a slave. So, picture with me what it might have been for her life back then. First of all, she was a female, and in those times, that's pretty much second class. You're second class if you're female. Sorry, no offense. That's how it was. And on top of it, she was a slave. So she was the lowest of the low. She was a slave and she was a female. It's pretty hard to get lower than that in life, to be a female slave. And I know it sounds pretty sexist, but that's how it was. And unfortunately, that's the life she would have lived. That she would have been the lowest of the low. And on top of it, she was young. So she was a young female slave, probably in her early 20s, who was put in prison with her church. Now, what would happen to Christians in those times? The Romans would take them out into a public theatre and ask them a question. Usually, the general question was the same. It was, do you denounce Jesus Christ as Lord, and will you offer something for the emperor? That was the general idea. That you say, Jesus Christ is not Lord, but the emperor is God. That's the idea. And that's why they were thrown in prison, because they said only Jesus is God and Lord. So every day, they will be tortured, and the question will be asked to them, do you denounce Jesus Christ as Lord? And if they answered no, they would be tortured until they died. And it would continue day after day, day after day, day after day. Now, the whole church eventually, unfortunately, died, except two people. And this was the female slave and another young 15-year-old boy. Only two of them left. And this is after many days of being tortured. And this particular girl was asked a question, a bit different to the other people of her church. She was asked, do you denounce Jesus Christ as Lord and confess there is wickedness amongst you? So it was saying, in terms we can understand, is that do you confess to being a sorcerer? Or do you confess to being, like demon-possessed? And something that we can relate to today is that do you confess of being of the world? Do you confess of not living a life righteous before God and righteous before man? Do you confess a life which is wicked before the world? And every time this girl was asked this question, she goes, I am a Christian and there is no wickedness amongst us. Every single time the question was asked her, she had the exact same response. I am a Christian and there is no wickedness amongst us. And eventually, when there was just two of them left, they asked her one more time in the public theater before everyone. They said, do you denounce Jesus Christ as Lord and confess there is wickedness amongst you? One more time she said, I am Christian and there is no wickedness amongst us. And firstly, they took the boy and they tortured him to death. And they took her and they tortured her to death. I know it's not a very encouraging story, but what I want to point to about this hero is that what her life represented. Her life said, Jesus Christ is my Lord. That's all good and well, guys, if we confess that. That's beautiful. I'm really happy if today you told me that Jesus Christ is your Lord. That's tops. I cannot tell you how happy I am to hear that. But how much more happy I will be if we can all say together that there is no wickedness amongst us. That I can go up in front of the whole world and tell them Jesus Christ is my Lord, and I'm not ashamed to say that because in my life there is no wickedness. Now, with my friends at university, last year, for instance, I was ashamed to tell them that Jesus Christ is my Lord. And that's nothing to do with who I am. You guys all know me. I'm a very outspoken person. I'm not ashamed to tell people that I'm Christian. I have no shame in Christ, but because I was ashamed of the life I was living. I was ashamed that if I would say I am a Christian, that my life was not righteous. So what would I be doing to my Lord? And this is exactly what I'm trying to tell you guys today is that if Jesus Christ is my Lord, and I want to make a stand for Jesus Christ, if I want to be a hero of faith, my life must be living according to the righteousness which I have been given. And my goal right now, my challenge, and I hope you guys can take this challenge, is that one day you'll be able to say proudly and happily, without any shame in your life, that Jesus Christ is my Lord and there is no wickedness in my life. There is no wickedness in my life. And of course, in my life there is no sin because Jesus Christ has died for me and taken all my sins. And he has given me my righteousness. But it's different between having given righteousness and living a life according to that righteousness. And really, when I read these stories, this is just one of the stories which we have. There's countless stories. And I'm going to say this, and I'm not ashamed to say this. When I read that book, I honestly was close to crying. Honestly, I was. And I'm not a crying type of guy. I honestly am not. The last time I cried when someone accidentally hit me in my nose and my eyes get watery. Honestly, I'm not a crying type of guy, to be honest. But when I read that book, I was on the verge of crying. Because you read about those Christians, and it is just only one of those stories. And I didn't even go into details for you what actually happened. I only wanted you guys to understand the general concept of what occurred. Because I don't want to go into that sort of stuff. There's many stories I can share with you. I can share with you who were African slaves at the time, who, despite everything, stood up for Christ. I can talk to you guys about the people who were high-ranking officials in the Roman Empire who proclaimed Jesus Christ as Lord. And not only them died, but the whole family died because of that man who confessed Jesus Christ as Lord. There's so many stories I can share with you. But my point is today, as Christians today, who we live in a supposedly persecution-free world, a persecution-free country, why are we not doing more than these people? You know, these people had persecution, they had all these troubles, yet they lived a life 100-fold better than mine. And for me, that doesn't make sense. If I'm free of any bondage on my back, shouldn't I be living a life that is just absolutely glorifying to God? If I have nothing on my back to pull me down, shouldn't I be living a life that is just every moment, every waking moment, it's about God? You know, and the only thing I can conclude is that I could not say that in my life there was no wickedness. And that's why I could not say that. And that's why I couldn't live it, because I couldn't say happily and proudly that there was no wickedness in my own life. And thank God the Bible gives us a solution. And I think it's a wonderful solution. And I think, in fact, most of you would have heard this verse before. But I think, just let's have a look at it. Chapter 12, Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1 and 2. Now, there's 2 points I want you guys to focus on. There's 2 things. Before we read them and before we talk about these 2 things, I want to make emphasis on the fact that right now I'm talking to people who proclaim that Jesus Christ is their Lord. I'm talking to you people who have put their faith in Jesus Christ, have put their trust and their life in Jesus Christ, and God, Jesus himself, has given them his righteousness, that they're now cloaked with his righteousness and washed by his blood. I'm talking to you people today. I'm talking to you guys that we must live a life according to that righteousness which we have been given. And there's 2 things we must do to be able to proclaim we are free of wickedness. Let's read verse 1 and verse 2 of chapter 12. Michael, do you want to read it for us?
Therefore we also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witness, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God.
Now, there's 2 things I want to point out in this verse. 2 things. Now, before we point out those 2 things, the first word, he says, therefore, since we have all these great cloud of witnesses, since we have all these people we've heard about, and I've told you not only people from the Bible, but people from Christianity. These were people, Jews. But I'm talking about all these people. Because of all these people and the life they've lived, because of their witness and their life, how much more should you be living? And this is what you have to do. And the first thing, and take note of this, the first thing is, let us lay aside every weight. Let us lay aside every weight. Now, obviously, it's not talking about here as fat like me, to take off weight. But when it says, let us lay aside every weight, it's saying here, put off everything that in your life is holding you back from living a life for God. And I don't know what that's for you. I really don't. And believe it or not, it does not have to only be sin. It could be your family. It could be your friends. It could be your work. It could be your school. It could be your university. It could be a game. It could be anything. I don't know what it can be. It could be your car. But God is telling us now, if you want to live a life of a hero, you want to live a life where you are my hero, where you will live according to your faith, you must lay aside every weight. And I tell you, the only way to do this is go before God and ask God. Say, God, show me the things in my life which are holding me back from running the race for you. Show me the things in my life which are not glorifying you. Show me the things in my life which I must pull off and put before your feet. That's the first point. To lay aside every weight. Now, second point is verse 2. Looking unto Jesus, the author and the finisher of our faith. When you've laid aside all these things in your life, when you've talked to God, you say, God, show me these things, and I put them before you, I put them before your throne, I no longer have them pulling me down, what do? You look unto Jesus Christ. Now, I want to give you a quick example of this. Today, I was walking to Joel's house. Believe it or not, I actually did walk to Joel's house. It was a huge walk. It was like 30 minutes. And I was sweating and puffing at the end of it. Yeah, it was really tiring. But let me tell you guys something. When you walk to Joel's house, you can actually see Joel's apartment majority of the way. You can see, isn't that right, Joel? Majority of the way, you can see Joel's apartment. And it's pretty cool. I really like that. Because, the whole time, you have your goal before you. You have your destination. And every step, I'm like, I'm dying of tiredness. I just look up, I'm like, it's closer. It's okay. I'll get there eventually. When I walk home when I go home and I have to walk home, it's the worst thing in the world because I have to go through all these turns. Like, sometimes I walk from Liverpool to home when there's no buses. Right? It's not that far. It seems far, but it's not that far. The worst thing is that you never know when you're close. Especially if, for instance, it's not a well-traveled road, But right now as Christians, we are called to do what I did when I walked to Joel's house. We are meant to put our eyes upon Jesus. You guys get what I'm saying? In this life, we have Jesus to look to. We have Jesus to look to because, trust me, if you want to spend your time looking on the things on the earth, if you're going to walk with your head down, you're going to be so discouraged, so dismayed, so put down for what the world has put in front of you. But when you look to Jesus and you look to him, you only see peace and you see joy no matter what is happening around you. You only are encouraged to reach that destination more and more. And also, you guys got to understand, when we look to Jesus, the author and the finisher of our faith, it's also talking about conforming to his image. When you're looking to Jesus and you're walking towards him, every day you should be more and more like Jesus. Every day, my life should be more of a Jesus smell. We talked about, smells last week, that we have to smell good, that we have to be sweet smelling to God. And that this is exactly what we're talking about today. When you've laid aside all your weights, you have to look to Jesus and walk a life which is sweet smelling to God. And sweet smelling that it only smells of Jesus. And I want to add a comment about this smell issue. I was trying to explain to Joel today, but I couldn't really word it right. We were leaving Hungry Jack's, and there's a sign that says enter, but Joel exited through it. But there's no sign that says no exit. All right? Now, I'm not trying to tease Joel here. I'm not. But we were talking about how that just because it says enter doesn't mean it implies no exit. I believe it does. In the same way, when God tells us to be sweet smelling to God, it implies don't be a stinky smell to God. Do you guys get what I'm saying? It's implied. The Bible doesn't have to say it. And stinky smell, have you guys ever smelled something that is not really that bad, but it's just around you and like it's not a bad smell, but it's just irritating. Like you'll survive, but like it's just you guys know what I'm talking about. Those kind of smells that just lurking around. Now being that lurking smell means you're not a sweet smelling smell. Sweet smelling smell. Aroma. That's right. Now, what does that have to do with what we're talking about? You might tell me today, Joseph, in my life, I'm pretty good. You might tell me, I'm pretty holy, and you're probably right. You're probably more holy and righteous than me. But what I'm telling you guys is that just because you're living a life which is all right, just okay, you're not that bad, you're still not a sweet-smelling aroma to God. A sweet-smelling aroma is not a passive, hindrance kind of smell. It's a sweet-smelling aroma, a smell you just want to take a big whiff of. Yeah? You guys following me? See, when Jesus tells us to look only to him, when God tells us to look unto Jesus, we must look with everything, every fiber in your being, you look to Jesus. Not only some fragment, not only on Friday nights, not only on Sundays, not only when you're with your family, but every moment, every fiber of your being, you're looking unto Jesus. I know it's a weird example, but I hope you guys all understood. So I'm going to ask everyone, that's what I have to share with you guys today. So I'm going to ask everyone to close their eyes. And right now, there's no point in delaying, I'm going to ask everyone, right now, pray to God. Ask God, what in your life is hindering you from living a life to fullest for God? What is weighing you down from living a life which is a life of a hero for God? What's stopping you from being a hero of faith? And it could be, like I said, it could be just obvious sin. It could be hidden sin. It could be something that's not really that obvious. But pray to God right now. Ask God, what in my life is holding me back? Now, I hope you guys are all praying, and when God has shown you and has pointed out to you what in your life must be thrown away, put it before God. That's the only thing we can do with it, because by your own works, you will not overcome it. By your own might, you won't. But by God's strength, you will. So you give it to God right now. You give it to God and say, God, I lay aside this race, I give them to you, I'll only look to Jesus. And after you've prayed this prayer, you say, help me, God, to only look to Jesus in my life.